Hello and thanks for joining us. This is the World News at 12 on Voice of the People 90.3 FM. I am Solomon of First Out Top Stories. Southwest states tighten borders amid banditry surge in Kwara. INEC hosts EU observation follow-up mission on electoral reforms. NAFDAC seals 2 Chinese supermarkets in Abuja. Atiku denies agreeing to step down for any candidate ahead 2027. FG and reps to deepen collaboration on flood mitigation. Outside Nigeria, Africa CDC warns of outbreak and secures partnership for health security. And in sport, FIFA cannot solve geopolitical problems like Gaza, Infantino says. Those are our top stories. The details coming up in just a moment. We begin the news on the hour with insecurity story where states in the southwest have tightened security following the surge in attacks on communities and killings of suspected bandits and terrorists in neighboring Kwara state. Security chiefs in Oyo, Osun, Ekiti and Ondo state have confirmed that they had activated the various containment plans to prevent the infiltration of their states by bandits fleeing the ongoing military operations in Kwara. This came as the federal government undercover the movement of the bandits heading to the southwest region from Kwara. The bandits who recently attacked several communities and killed many residents in Kwara state are being targeted and tracked by intelligence agencies to ensure that they don't advance to Oyo and other southwest states. Sources said an intelligence report detailing the activities and movement of the bandits was receiving attention at the highest level of government. It was gathered that a containment strategy had been activated to address the concerning development. In the past weeks, Kwara has experienced a surge in terrorist attacks, particularly on the north-south axis. The Independent National Electoral Commission INEC has hosted the European Union Election Observation Follow-up Mission with both sides assessing progress made in implementing recommendations from the 2023 general election. Speaking at the meeting in Abuja, INEC Chairman Mahmoud Yakubu explained that the follow-up exercise is in line with EU tradition of monitoring reforms halfway between one general election and the next, as they recalled that the Commission had previously received similar missions in 2027 and 2022.
Carefully considered all the 8 recommendations specifically addressed to us in your report. Action has been taken on aspects of the recommendations that only require administrative action to implement. Similarly, action is being taken on cross-cutting recommendations that require collective action between INEC and other bodies and stakeholders, while waiting for the conclusion of the ongoing legal review by the National Assembly on the recommendations that require legislative intervention. To this end, the Commission has prepared a detailed response to each of the 8 direct observations which we shared with you at this meeting. I must add that your recommendations, along with similar reports from other national and international election observers, were the subject of wide-ranging consultations with critical institutions and stakeholders during our own review of the 2023 general election. The review report contains 142 recommendations for electoral reform. In addition, the Commission has published our main 2023 general election report over a year ago. The main report for the election, as well as our review reports, are already available from our website.
Ayakubu noted that the EU observation mission to the 2019 elections made 30 recommendations, including 11 directed at INEC, while the 2023 report contained the 23 recommendations, 8 of which required action by the Commission. Only one of these were marked as a priority, while the remaining 15, including 5 priority recommendations, were directed at other stakeholders such as the executive, legislature, judiciary, political party, civil society, media and professional groups. In his remark, the chief observers of the EU election observation mission, Barry Andrews, commended Nigeria's significance in the global democratic process. He also described the 2023 mission as one of the largest EU deployments.
Deployed here for the last 3 weeks and will remain for a further week as part of this electoral observation mission. So what we are here to do is to look at the recommendations that flowed from the overall mission that were contained in the final report of the mission back in 2023. And we are very happy to see that there has been very significant progress against these recommendations. We recognize that there are certain time constraints, both in terms of judicial reform as well as administrative reform, and of course constitutional reform, which is somewhat more difficult. But we are making all of these recommendations against international standards that the EU, that Nigeria, that most countries have signed up to, and so we are part of an overall international election observation ecosystem that has really served to buttress democracy, to support democracy, not just here in Nigeria, not just in Africa, but across the world.
The National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, has sealed 2 Chinese supermarkets in the Federal Capital Territory, FCT. The supermarkets were sealed for selling goods that were allegedly not approved in the country. The agency also puts on hold 8 other shops at the Wuse market for selling aphrodisiac sex enhancement pills. They were also found to be selling body enlargement creams and drugs for breast and buttock, including other toxic substances produced with dangerous chemicals. Mbagushiki Musa Godia, head of NAFDAC Investigation and Enforcement Unit Abuja, said during the enforcement operation that the exercise was in response to consumer complaints. He said the market value of the product seized during the raids is about 170 million naira. He said that the sellers of the product had declared themselves doctors and pharmacists prescribing drugs for unsuspecting Nigerians. On the closure of the Chinese supermarket, Godia said that the agency also acted on intelligence it gathered from concerned citizens that there are some supermarkets belonging to some foreign nationals. He said that these foreign nationals were said to have brought into Nigeria certain items, most of which were food items, and were labeled in Chinese languages without any English translation. And now to politics, where former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has denied agreeing to step down for anyone ahead of the 2027 presidential election. Atiku spokesman Paul Ibe said in a statement that the interview the 2023 PDP presidential candidate granted in Hausa was misrepresented. Ibe further stated that what Atiku Abubakar clearly and unambiguously said was that young people as well as other prospective presidential aspirants are free to enter the contest. Atiku is said to run on the platform of the African Democratic Congress ADC, which opposition heavyweights have chosen as their rallying point to take on the ruling APC. In July, Atiku formally resigned his membership of the PDP, citing irreconcilable differences. He noted that they found it necessary to part ways due to the current trajectory the party has taken, which according to him diverges from the fundamental principles it stood for. Atiku was elected as the vice president on the platform of the PDP, serving under ex-president Olusegun Obasanjo from 1999 to 2007. He has also been the PDP's presidential candidate in 2 occasions, flying the party's flag in the 2019 and 2023 elections. However, Atiku did not succeed in the 2 outings for the party. The Federal Ministry of Water Resources and Sanitation has pledged stronger collaboration with the House of Representatives at a committee on flood management and response to tackle perennial flooding across the country. The Minister of Water Resources and Sanitation, Joseph Utsev, gave the assurance in Abuja when the committee paid a working visit to the ministry. Utsev said the partnership was crucial to enable both arms of government work collectively for effective flood control and management. He noted that the ministry had over the years invested greatly in dams and irrigation projects across the 6 geopolitical zones for flood control, irrigation and power generation. According to him, projects include the Kashim Bila multipurpose dam in Taraba, designed to provide water for irrigation and power supply. He added that several others, such as the Mangu Dam in Plateau and Adada Dam in Enugu, were at various stages of completion. He added that work was also progressing steadily at the Alau Dam in Borno, while the design of a buffer dam at Dasin Hausa in Adamawa had been completed. You're still listening to the World News at 12 on Voice of the People 90.3 FM. We'll go for a short break, after which our news analysis segment will be up next. Joining me to help analyze the news items is Kingsley Chime, a legal practitioner and current affairs analyst. Barrister Chime, thank you for joining us on the news.
Thank you so much for having me, Mr. Solomon, and good afternoon, listeners.
Now, let's go to the first topic for discussion, where states in the southwest have heightened security following the surge in attacks in communities and killings by suspected bandits and terrorists in neighboring Kwara state. Now, one thing is for sure, insecurity right now in Nigeria is mostly in the north. And of course, we've seen insecurity in Nigeria is definitely experienced all over the country, but it is predominantly in the north and less in the southwest. Even though one of the biggest insecurity situation has been in Ondo State with the killing of church members 3 years ago, but you would agree that most of the insecurity issues have been happening in the north. But with what's happening in Kwara State a few days ago, there should be genuine fear in the southwest that the insecurity is encroaching more and more deeper into the southwest.
Well, thank you once more for having me. I think there should be genuine fear that insecurity is almost all over the country. So there shouldn't be a fear that is coming to a particular region. It's not a regional issue. It's a national concern that security forces must be able to contain. So when I read the report that efforts are being made by some regions to contain the spread of the insecurity in their region, I began to imagine whether those ones who are majorly affected by the insecurity are not human beings, whether they are not Nigerians, So we are all in Nigeria. It would have been a different thing if it's an outsider interference, We cannot say that we are streamlining our borders to ensure that this thing doesn't get to us. But we are in the same country, in the same Nigeria, and security, I don't know what the security chiefs, are trying to, tighten the border. So you tighten the borders so that the insecurity will finish the other region where the insecurity is predominantly, being affected. So I think we as the people must have a holistic and a Nigerian perspective on dealing with issues that concerns national security. It is not a regional war. It is not something that every region or state will say will have to begin to tighten up? Are you tightening your borders in the sense that genuine citizens or genuine businessmen and women who have reasons to be in one state or the other will also be worried about the state of insecurity in other parts of the country?
Why indeed it's not a regional thing, but you would agree that it's been predominantly in the north and some parts of the southeast rather, and the middle belt. I mean, we don't get to hear Boko Haram or bandits as often in states like Lagos or your state or Osun State as against Benue State, Taraba State, and so many of the states up north. That's what we're talking about here.
Yes, I'm not trying to undermine the efforts of security forces to contain the spread of insecurity. The point I'm making is that we should also be concerned about containing the insecurity generally in Nigeria. Of course, one would think that when, like you mentioned, some certain insecurity issues are predominantly in certain areas, and there is need for the security forces to ensure that it doesn't spread the whole Nigeria, so to speak. But the effort should be made towards containment of these insecurities, no matter where they could be found, irrespective of the region. Yes, of course, there is indeed need to ensure that it doesn't get, across all the states in Nigeria. But the security forces must be living up to the expectation to ensure that the insecurity is totally decimated in Nigeria.
And then security chiefs in Oyo, Osun, Ekiti, and Ondo states have confirmed that they had activated various containment plans to prevent the infiltration of other states bandits by, and one begin to wonder, is it that these security situations weren't in place before when they hear stories of other states being ravaged by bandits and Boko Haram and splinter groups like that?
Honestly, I don't know. You listened to news a few days ago where some bandits were addressing, community members while they are heavily armed. And you even saw some military people giving them cover while they are they are having a meeting. How on earth are you going to be having a meeting with a bandit who came to kill? In fact, there are islands here that they released some people that were their hostages on certain understanding. So if these things are happening, and security chiefs, I don't know who are the security chiefs in those regions you are mentioning, because as far as I'm concerned, we have one police in Nigeria and being headed by the Inspector General of Police. So if the other service chiefs like the Armed Forces and the Air Force and the Army, they are all headed by one formation. So you cannot have different service chiefs in different states. It's being controlled as a national integration. So the actions, like I said, of perhaps the report might tend to say the commissioners of police in those states, which are also subject to the actions of the entire police as a force or as an institution. So it's not something that a commissioner of police would think that he can on his own. If that is the position, of course, you would think that other state commissioners also, have other security measures in their own state to ensure that even where these insecurities are predominantly, dominated, they are also being addressed. So I would think that the issue of insecurity in Nigeria requires a concerted effort, not just a regional effort. Every commissioner of police, every service chief must collaborate to ensure that insecurity is addressed in Nigeria.
As you just mentioned, we have some states, especially in the north, some local governments in some states, and the latest being Katsina State, some last week or 2 weeks ago, where we heard stories that some communities and some local government have been making deals with bandits, which of course what you just alluded to. But the question is, would you blame them when the federal government is not exactly? I mean, we are in a situation right now where security in Nigeria have to come from the federal government, have to come from Abuja, and in that kind of situation, we all know the insecurity can't be curbed. Would you now blame these communities for trying to go enter into a deal with these bandits because it is their life after all?
Absolutely, I agree with you. Absolutely, you don't blame the community. He who wears the shoes knows where it pinky. And if the Nigerian state cannot solve their problem, they have to take their destinies by their own hands. It's akin to a situation of being in between the devil and deep blue sea. It's a too difficult situation that you have to take decision one way or the other, the one that you feel protects you more. So of course, what the community members are doing is to, at least given the option, they will choose to discuss with these people if they could be spared, if some of their lives could be spared. But the bigger question or the big elephant in the room is that should security issues be left in the hands of communities, in the hands of citizens themselves to begin to address people who have sophisticated weapons and you are having meetings with them? What do you think will be the outcome of these meetings? It's essentially,
and you see some of this local government chairman in attendance, even brokering the deal.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So they are taking their own fate in their own hands, because since the institution of the state could not protect them, they have to. So while I made those references to show how badly the institution security in Nigeria has become and how helpless the citizens has also become in the face of this ravaging insecurity. So why no one should blame the community members or the community leaders or local government chairmen, towards looking for a better option for them to deal with this insecurity? The Nigerian state must rise up to the occasion to ensure that insecurity is made a national emergency in Nigeria.
Now, the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has consistently said he supports state police. But for someone that has consistently said that he supports state police, we don't exactly see any modalities for them to, there is no action for that to be actualized. Do you think that is because the state police have to be entrenched in the constitution, not like in singly, but the whole constitution have to be reformed generally for state police to be actualized?
Yes, the call for state police has been there for quite a while, and is a legitimate call for well-meaning citizens, especially in the face of the insecurity in Nigeria. If you look at other countries of the world, like United States, you don't have FBI is not everywhere. Each council has their own police to deal with their own local concerns. But given the peculiarity of Nigeria and the kind of democracy we claim to be operating, there are certain concerns as to if the state police would yield its required desired intention if implemented, whether it is being codified, for governors of different states, respective states, to have power to control their state and local government as the case may be. But by and large, some of these concerns are rooted in politics, in the sense that perhaps the politicians at the national level are also skeptical about giving such powers to the regional government, because that would also contain their own powers or excess. Because if you see how police is being used in Nigeria, you see that it's essentially being used by the rich to protect themselves, while the poor masses are left helpless to to deal with the situation. So they're also concerned that if these powers are being regionalized, as the case may be, the governors may become too powerful, or the national government may not have that kind of level of control, in terms of giving orders as against what the Police Act or the law establishing the police force requires. So these concerns are genuine in themselves, but we have to, as a people, like you said, have a policy direction on how the state police should or ought to be implemented. It is not just going to be like we borrow this from other regions where it is currently being operated, but we have to also put into consideration our own peculiarities and our own differences as well.
But the big question is, why hasn't the president start making plans for that, despite the fact that he has come out a few times to pronounce that he support the creation of state police, but there is nothing going on, there is no movement. He's not told the National Assembly to activate that immediately. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, of course, I made the point. I said because the national government are also skeptical about relinquishing these powers. Politics is about influence and power. So they're also skeptical about relinquishing these powers to
but he's come out. He has come out to pronounce it without having to include these fears in his pronunciation. Do you
no. He doesn't have to. He doesn't have to. These are written fears. He doesn't have to tell you. Yes, of course.
In other words, he's just playing lip service to just tell the Nigerian populace what they want without having to do anything.
Playing devil's advocate. He's a devil's advocate because he doesn't really. It's not really about what he says. It's about what the actions we have taken. Have you sent any executive bill to the National Assembly for these things to be properly structured and codified? It is not something you do by public announcement or explaining your own desire. You cannot be telling us what you desire when you have the power to make it come to fruition. So it's actually playing politics and playing devil's advocate. They really know how these things work, and they understood the implications at the end of the day.
Okay, let's go to the next topic for discussion, where INEC, Independent National Electoral Commission, hosted the European Union Election Observation Follow-up Mission, with both sides assessing progress made in the implementing recommendations for the 2023 general elections. Now, obviously, there have been a cry for electoral reform, which is one major reason why there is skepticism on the part of the citizenry that their vote will not count, and some of them take the 2023 general election as a case in point, with some Nigerians feeling that that election was not the true reflection of the Nigerians' vote. And then the EU observation team have come to Nigeria to visit INEC to make sure some of these electoral reforms are made. But for some reason, it looks like the APC-led government, the INEC, as it were, have been dragging their feet in terms of trying to do any form of election reforms. At least that's what some Nigerians believe. Do you believe that too?
Well, the truth of the matter is that in every democratic institution, election is one of the major indices of democracy. If or remove electioneering processes in every democracy, there is no democracy. So why people are making calls for electoral system to be reformed is not far from the truth. And the reason is because over the years, especially during election cycle, you begin to see that there is room for improvement in the current legislation of electoral process. And if you observe closely the outcome of 2023 general election, one of the major motivations that propel people to come out en masse to participate in that election was because of INEC's electoral guidelines at the time, which of course the INEC has the power to do, to make guidelines to regulate the conduct of elections. INEC came out publicly to announce that the results were going to be transmitted electronically from the polling unit to the central server, what they call central repository. So So this was a major motivation. Alas, at the end of that exercise, we all knew how it ended. So while calls for electoral reforms are very important, the electoral umpires are they also willing to implement these reforms? Because if, for instance, the calls are also part of the calls as we speak, is that the election be transmitted. There should be a law. That the constitution should be amended to provide for electronic transmission of this result. But even while this has not been done at the time, the INEC still has the power to have these guidelines and regulate this election towards achieving this objective. This they also came up with in their guidelines, but they just send it at the end of the day or in the middle of the game. It's like having a match, a football match, and they are changing the goalposts in the middle of the game or the rules. So that actually became one of the major concerns of Nigerians following the aftermath of that election. So yes, there have been calls and they are continue to be called. Yes, I agree. There is no perfect election in any society. There is no perfect democracy anyway. We'll continue to reform, as events unfold. But because our electoral system as this has not addressed one of the most challenging aspects of our democracy, elections should be won and lost at the polling unit during election day, and not at the court. So what happens is that more often than not, we finish the election or electoral process in the ballot, the whole thing moves to the court, the judiciary. And I can tell you that given the current electoral jurisprudence we have in Nigeria, it will take only grace of God for anybody to be able to, successfully challenge the outcome of every election, particularly federal election in Nigeria. The burden of proof is so insurmountable that it can never, given the time frame, it will be near impossible for anybody to successfully challenge the outcome of any presidential election in Nigeria. Of course, there have been condemnations, there have been criticisms about justice system, justice delivery, judiciary, and all of that. But I'm speaking as a lawyer who understood the jurisprudence of our electoral system. And it's near impossible. Where the losing party has the burden to prove that the election was marked by irregularity. As against INEC having the duty to prove that the election complied with the requirements of the electoral laws and acts. So this will shift that burden to a losing end, who of course does not even have the required documentation. You will still have to rely on the agency or institution that has the power to conduct the election to give them the evidence they need to adduce in court. That cannot work. It has never worked. So we must begin to reform our electoral process so that elections should be won and lost at the polling unit.
Okay. Thank you very much, Barrister Chime. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
That was Kingsley Chime, a legal practitioner and current affairs analyst. And now to stories outside Nigeria. The Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC, has raised alarm over multiple ongoing outbreaks across the continent while announcing fresh partnerships and funding support aimed at strengthening Africa's health security. Dr. Jean Kaseya, Director General Africa CDC, said this during the weekly media webinar news conference held in Addis Ababa. Kaseya said that the continent is witnessing a heavy disease burden with more than 116,000 suspected cases of mpox, 254,000 cholera infections, and more than 116,000 measles cases reported between January and September 2025. Other major outbreaks, he said, include dengue fever, Lassa fever, Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo DRC, and a new Rift Valley fever outbreak in Senegal. To strengthen response capacity, he said that Africa CDC signed a landmark memorandum of understanding with UNAIDS to expand Africa's health workforce, enhance local manufacturing, and ensure sustainable HIV responses. He said that the United Kingdom government also approved direct funding to the Africa CDC, marking a significant milestone in the agency's bid to establish financial independence and accountability. On Ebola, Kasaya confirmed that Kasai province in DRC has recorded 53 confirmed cases and 31 deaths, but vaccination campaigns have already reached more than 9,000 people, including frontline health workers. A United States immigration judge has denied an asylum bid for Kilma Abrego Garcia, whom the administration of President Donald Trump wrongfully deported to El Salvador earlier this year before returning him to the U.S. The rejection was hailed by the Trump administration, which has remained defiant about deporting Abrego Garcia in March despite the judge's order. Abrego Garcia's case has become emblematic for critics of abuses under Trump's mass deportation effort. In a post on the social media platform X, the Department of Homeland Security said, quote, "One thing is certain after the ruling, this El Salvadoran man is not going to be able to remain in our country," end of quote. However, Abrego Garcia will still have 30 days to appeal the decision issued by the Baltimore-based immigration judge. Abrego Garcia crossed into the U.S. without documentation as a teenager and has lived in Maryland with his wife and children for several years. In other sports news, FIFA President Gianni Infantino has said that football cannot solve geopolitical problems as it comes under pressure to suspend Israel over the Palestinian conflict. The sports world governing body said in a statement that a meeting of the FIFA Council, Infantino stressed that importance of promoting peace and unity, particularly in the context of the ongoing situation in Gaza. Infantino said, and I quote, "At FIFA, we are committed to using the power of football to bring people together in a divided world. Our thoughts are with those who are affected in the many conflicts that exist around the world today, and the most important message that football can convey right now is one of peace and unity," end of quote. He added that FIFA cannot solve geopolitical problems, but it can and must promote football around the world by harnessing its unifying educational, cultural, and humanitarian values. FIFA banned Russia in 2022 shortly after Russian forces invaded Ukraine, despite the fact that Russia hosted the World Cup finals 4 years ago. And now to end the news, let's take a look at our headlines again. Southwest State tightened borders and amid banditry surge in Kwara. INEC hosts EU observation follow-up mission in electoral reforms. NAFDAC seals 2 Chinese supermarkets in Abuja. Atiku denies agreeing to step down for any candidate ahead 2027. FG and reps to deepen collaboration on flood mitigation. On the international scene, Africa CDC warns of outbreak while securing partnerships for health security. And in sport, FIFA cannot solve geopolitical problems like Gaza, Infantino says. And that's the world news at 12 on Voice of the People 90.3 FM. I am Solomon of FM. Good afternoon.